Hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to quickly talk about 15.9, patch 2509, however you want to describe it. There aren't many teams listed on the board. I only listed 3 of 60. The majority of these teams, 57 of 60, fell between +4 and +1 on this patch. And we'll talk about how I view the patch. Not in the nitty gritty, but we're going to talk a little bit more about the champions and things that were affected because we don't have much listed on here. So the way I look at a patch is if a champion is buffed according to Riot, a team that has players that have utilized that champion within the last 2+ years, out of 4% of games, 1 out of every 25, they are buffed, right? That player is more likely to use that champion relative to somebody else. And you may say, well, everybody used K'Sante. You have it listed on here 3 times. Everybody but like 2 top laners, like Gen X. So I do not include games not in a tier 1 region. So Gen X was playing in ERLs the last 2 years. So he technically didn't get the K'Sante buff. And somebody else didn't either that didn't play much K'Sante. I think Rest doesn't play K'Sante, but Driver does, so it's irrelevant. But still, some players don't play K'Sante. And that's surprising, but it's the case. And then you have some instances where you say, oh, well, what about Shen? Well, Shen's been buffed again, right? And Shen is a triple flex. You could flex it in the jungle if you wanted to. It might not be strong at the moment, but it could be flexed. And then you have Nerfs. And a Nerf, to me, is a team that's played the champion at least 10% of games. And you may say, that's a lot of games. Well, were several teams that played enough Callista to end up nerfed, and there were quite a few teams to play enough Nefiri. Probably, I think, 10 or so. Gwen being picked by many. We see Gwen being nerfed on in the case of Shanji in Nip. Not many people played a lot of Gwen, but he did. And that washed it out. That's why they end up with a 0, because actually they were +2 and then -2. We see Anyone's Legend. They were +5 because they play K'Sante. Shanks likes playing Annie and Orianna. Not everybody can claim that. You'd think, oh, a lot of people played Annie a couple of years ago. And yeah, sure, maybe somebody's Annie was so good it was banned and this and that. But let's just talk about what was played and what wasn't, what was on the Rift and what wasn't. And Shanks was one of like maybe 8 to 10 mid laners that can claim 4% of games played, so at least 8% combined. Well, no, I don't want to say that because you're not going to get the buff if it's 9% Orianna, 7% Orianna, 1% Annie. But 2 champions that, if you played them 4% of your games, then they ended up being buffed. BDD was another one, Xiao Hu another example. We think of Annie as a facilitator mid, low resource. Alti, obviously, with Tibbers is a different one. A champion that we saw in 2023 quite a bit, and it's being buffed. We did see that support as well. A couple supports played it quite a bit. They did not play 4%, but a player like PP God played it 5 times. Huhi 5 times. Mako 8 times, but Mako's played so many games the last 2 years plus. He's played like 300 games of tier 1 play. He ends up not getting the buff for it. But he plays it a lot. So Annie's been buffed. Does Annie all of a sudden become a flex to support again? Hell, Mirwin played a top lane this year. Is it going to be a top lane flex? With the way that the itemization's going. And of course, the buffs, the patches could buff nerf items and runes. And hell, they're going through Season 2 right now, right? They're going to address the map, change the way that the game is played objectively, and objective control is going to affect a myriad of things when it comes to composition, right? If the Drake now is the first objective because you've pushed Void Grubs back, you've maybe moved up, I think they moved up Rift Herald 1 minute, but the Drake is now the first objective. So now instead of Void Grubs and top side being the first objective, the bot side is first. And more traditional lane assignments will be a result, I imagine. And we'll see a lot of opportunities for dives bot side trying to set up for Drake control, which is something we're more used to. Void Grubs being an addition last year, right? So not really something that was around for the first 13, 14 years of LOL Esports. So that's interesting. I mean, like I already said about Shen, I think Shen is a fun pick. One of my favorite picks, really, because it does offer that flex. I like the ulti being a global. I do like champions with global ultimates, especially in the support role or in a low resource aspect, maybe in top lane, where we've seen traditionally a Shen be played. What else did we have on this patch? Yorick was nerfed. More so Yorick jungle from what I read, but still. Some players were playing Yorick, and who knows what's going to happen. They might not. Nobody played it 10% of games, but some people did play it a bit. Callista being nerfed. Callista was a big pick. Ashe being buffed. We saw a lot of support Ashe 2 years ago, and more so 3 years ago. And quite a few players could claim an Ashe buff with the Leona buff, right? 90% of supports play Leona, but there were some that don't. Some do not play that champion, and we oftentimes see the Leona being a handshake to the Nautilus. And Nautilus is a champion that, I see in the Discord, JB Beast loves talking about how he just does not like that Nautilus continues to show face in the meta in some way, shape, or form, and has for years. Leona is a traditional handshake to that, in my opinion. It's kind of like, okay, well, we're gonna leave Nautilus up, and you leave Leona up, and let's just play with these two supports. And we've seen that meta come and go over the years. We've seen enchanters being similar. There's always a handshake at support. That's why it's fun and interesting when you see a support willing to go outside of the box with counters to champions, because hey, they all of a sudden are gonna shake things up. And maybe that's where the Shen comes into play. I know I usually try and read Riot Froxen's takes on what he's doing with his patches on X. I know some people don't enjoy, maybe their favorite champion or the champion they're using isn't being buffed, or a champion that keeps destroying them in solo queue isn't being nerfed. But I do think that there is something to be said for a developer, well, not a developer, but a person doing game balance being willing to actually say, this is why I'm doing this. So at the very least, that they're trying to do something, whether you agree or disagree or think it's the right or wrong thing to do. At least they're being transparent. And I mean, it kind of shows how spoiled League players might be, because they many games don't do that. They're not as transparent in the goals that they're trying to achieve with their game balance. So anyone's legend, like I said, played K'Sante, Annie, Orianna, Ashe for Hope, Leona for Cal. DFM, so same 5. Arya plays Annie and Orianna quite a bit in mid lane, and if Arya's buffed, of course, that helps DFM tremendously. They're one of the worst teams right now in LoL Esports, in my opinion. Buffing Arya helps them, but it does not help them enough to get over the hump. Cocoon's Ashe is buffed, Harp's Leona, and we already talked about Nip. Yeah, so like 32% of teams are +4. So with this patch, the vast majority of things were buffs. I think there may be a dozen champions or so, and I think there are only 4 nerfs: Gwen, Yorick, Naafiri, and Callista. So most people are going to be buffed. That's why, somebody's at net 0. Well, shoot, they didn't play a lot of these champions that are buffed, and also Morgana's been buffed. We saw a couple people play Morgana jungle over the last couple of years. Is that going to be something that we see now that it's buffed? Are we going to see it in the mid lane? A couple players are willing to do that, or at the support role. Morg is an interesting pick. If it all of a sudden becomes viable when somebody pulls out a Blitzcrank, I'm going to play Morgana. It's viable. So I don't know. Figured I'd ramble a bit more about this patch than normal. Normally it's just the board, but there weren't many teams that were truly all that impacted by this patch. So thank you for watching. If you like the video, like it, subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, become a YouTube supporter, and hope to see you again tomorrow.